I'm Amy Willard from the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers, and I want to thank the Marin Property Association for inviting me to join you tonight. And also want to repeat our thanks to Joby Tapia for running for the water board. It would be a whole lot less of a mess if Joby had been elected. Anyhow, so just a couple introductory comments about who we are and what we do. The Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers is a non-partisan, non-profit advocate for sensible solutions. So we're trying to basically advocate on behalf of the taxpayer, voters, property owners for approaches that are affordable, fiscally responsible, fair, transparent, and that support the public good. And we're working for sensible solutions. Next slide, please. So we have a kind of unusual approach. We're not your typical anti-tax taxpayer group. We understand that there is a necessary role for public services, but we're trying to find approaches that are more broadly fair. We do some deep dive into financials, and we've been dubbed a transparency and budget hawk, and consider that a compliment. We will definitely oppose taxes and fees that don't meet our stated criteria. Those are on the green handout that we passed around. We've been very clear what they are. And unlike many other taxpayer groups, we'll actually endorse a tax that we think is really necessary and that is developed in a way that tries to be as fair as possible to the different people who pay for it. So we try for fair compromises. We think that perfect is the enemy of good. Now, unfortunately, that was not the case with the Marin Municipal Water District latest fee plan. I think you've all experienced the very big water rate hikes that have occurred since 2015. For many people, their water rates have already gone up 50 or 100% in a short period of time. And now on top of this, the water district is coming back with a multi-year plan to raise water rates up to 4% per year, it'll probably be 4% per year. And they also are imposing a very controversial, highly unpopular new capital maintenance fee that's supposed to be supporting the infrastructure of the district. And that new fee, that CMF, for the individual homeowner starts anywhere from $163 up to $187 per year, and it will grow at 4% along with the rates. And it's a completely illogical plan. It's based on the size of your meter, not how much water you use, but how much water you could use if you turned on all your taps at once. It's crazy. And it really has about zero support outside of the halls of MMWD. It punishes water conservers. It punishes many 1-inch plus residential customers, and it's very hard on a number of large properties where they're being vastly overcharged relative to their amount of use. And so if you have a property in which your tenants are being conservative with their water, you're going to be way overcharged, or they'll be way overcharged. We'll talk about it. Next chart, please. Next slide, please. So it's a bad plan, and they managed to make it get a lot worse as the process went along. One of the first things that happened was that the schools started howling, because a couple of the large school districts discovered that the amount of money that they were going to have to pay to MMWD each year would go up 150,000, 300,000 more in a single year. And so that alone could have killed this thing if the board had been responsive. But instead, they started putting big band-aids on things. So the first big band-aid was an exemption for all private fire lines. Now, you probably know, but basically the large diameter pipes that feed interior fire suppression sprinklers. And the water district said, well, we shouldn't be charging for that because fires don't happen very often, so there's really no reason to charge for that capacity. Well, that lasted about a nanosecond before all of the residential property owners or renters who would have to pay the bill said, well, wait, well, what about us? We have sprinklers too. So the water district said, oh, well, we didn't think about that. If you can prove somehow, but we haven't codified the rules, but if you can somehow demonstrate to us that you didn't need a larger diameter meter until such time as you had that sprinkler, then we'll cut you a deal and we'll drop you down 1 meter size. So then all of the other 1 or 1.5 inch residential customers said, well, what about us? I'm a low water user. Why does this other guy get a discount who also has the same size meter but just happens to have sprinklers that he never uses? So you can see where this is all going. Fewer and fewer of the customers are actually going to be paying the originally contemplated amount that was supposed to total $16.5 million a year for infrastructure, and they're dead set on getting that $16.5 million, so somebody's going to pay for it. There are more bites of this apple coming. Meanwhile, we came forward with a fair infrastructure funding plan that they refused to consider because it was logical. It was based on research. So, next slide, Tom. So the basic problem here is that the way that water districts work is that they operate under an exemption to Proposition 218, which is the voters' right to vote on all new taxes. And water districts and sanitary districts are exempted from that as essential public services. Now, but in order to have that exemption, they have to meet certain criteria and standards for the fees that they bring before you and charge you. One of them is, I won't go into all, but one of them is they can't charge more than the cost of service. Another one is that what they charge their different customers can't be disproportional, so they can't charge you more than your proportional cost of service. In addition, there are various very strong laws about the notice that they have to give you. So, for example, these 1 to 1.5 inch meter customers that I talked about before, the ones with the sprinklers, you have to have the larger meter to support the sprinklers. They have been promised or suggested that there might be a deal for them, but it's never actually been made concrete. So, did they have adequate notice? They don't know what they're going to pay. And then the real problem, which is now unfolding this week, Thursday, is now that the water district has been through the whole notice process, the hearing, they approved the new capital maintenance fee. Now they're coming back with a new round of exemptions. Who's left to exempt? Well, it turns out that the schools are still struggling, and so it's they on Thursday are going to vote on a plan to take all of the government agencies, including the cities, all the special districts, the schools, whatever, and they're going to allow them to postpone pay. They can get an exemption for 2 years. Then they can get an exemption for another 2 years. Then they can have 5-year payment terms at a low interest rates. So basically, it's just like, instead of paying now, you're kind of pushed out up to maybe 9 years. So clearly there was a problem here with the inadequate notice, and it's unfair. So this proposal also, I won't go too down in the weeds here, but it violates Prop 218 in another way. The capital maintenance fee was supposed to be for infrastructure, but fairly late in the process, I think it was decided that, well, people in Marin are worried about fire, let's do fire suppression and protection on the water district. Now, that, in a certain sense, that's very appealing, because the water district is full of dead accumulated fuel. Be good to get it cleaned out, but you still have to comply with the law. And if the water district is doing fire protection, which includes, in their instance, they have fire protection equipment, they have water tankers and the like, that benefits non-water district properties, and you can't have water district ratepayers paying for things that benefit non-water district residents and businesses. Fire protection, in fact, under the law for that kind of reason, is a general service, and it is not Prop 218 exempt. It would have to go before the voters for 2/3 approval. Another problem here is that this is basically bad public policy, because the way that they're charging for this fee discourages people from having the large meters that will accommodate sprinklers. If you have a large meter, they're saying, well, why don't you just make it into a smaller meter? And it's also going to be encouraging people who might be told by their local jurisdiction or their insurer or their fire chief that they should get sprinklers. It encourages them to do workarounds to avoid that, because it's going to be costly to them on an ongoing basis. So in fact, just today, the fire chiefs countywide in Marin sent the water district a notice of objection, saying that what they're trying to do here is contrary to good policy, and that they should not be charging people more for sprinkler compatible meters. So meanwhile, there's a related problem, which is that that charging a large fee, whether it's on your water bill or on the tax bill, ultimately is competing for the dollars of the residents or the dollars of the property owner for other tax measures and services that might be more important. Now, of interest to you as rental property owners probably are aware that this particular fee is also configured in a rather unusual way. Their premise going in was that renters shouldn't have to pay a water fee, even if they are renters, a capital fee, even if they're renters who are already directly receiving a water bill. So they decided that what they would do is to send that renter's portion of the capital maintenance fee straight to the property owner. But they missed the deadline to do that. So instead what's happening is that for 2 years, any renter who is on a water bill will receive the additional fee, and then after 2 years, it goes back to the property owner on the property tax bill. We think it's an illegal fee to start with, and our lawyer has sent a letter to the county of Marin warning them that it's at their peril if they engage in sending out a property tax bill for an illegal fee. In other words, they will be inviting themselves into a lawsuit that they don't need to be in. So, why does this matter to you? Well, ratepayers in general are harmed by a big fee for the reasons that we've already talked about. And then, as was talked about by the speakers before me, rental properties are in a squeeze play. Clearly that's the intent of putting this on the property tax bill. We believe the fee is illegal, but they're going to go after it anyway. And I think the other thing that I would like to mention is the bigger picture here, which is that if they get away with this, it emboldens more of the same, both at the water district and at other agencies and jurisdictions throughout the county, because if you can do illegal things and nobody will stand up to you and stop it, then you keep doing illegal things. doing, taxes that don't meet the criteria and transparency that's non-existent. So, what can we all do about this? The Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers and some individual plaintiffs of various categories have joined together to file suit to invalidate MMWD's plan, their fee plan. We will also seek in the interim to limit MMWD spending what we believe are illegal fees that are collected while the lawsuit unfolds. I don't know if we'll be successful, but that we would like to at least get that money quarantined, put in escrow or something. We'll look at ways to maybe try to get refunds of some of the capital maintenance fee. And towards that effort, we have hired a top California government fee litigation specialist. We were here in part to ask your help in paying the bill that makes this all happen. So I passed out some information on the eggshell colored paper that explains how you could donate if you are so inclined.
If anyone needs any, if you didn't get one of those forms, they're back on the back table.
So I will now just talk briefly about a couple other things that are on the horizon that might be of interest to you from the standpoint of coming taxes and so on that will be happening in the near term. First, I'd just like to point out that we do have some positive things going on. We think they're positive anyhow. We're not throwing grenades at everybody it's not our preferred strategy. Our preferred strategy is to make peace not war, which is to say to work with the different agencies and jurisdictions out there to a solution that, maybe not everybody's perfectly happy, but you're happier than you would have been if it had gone the wrong way. And one example of this happened actually just this week, which was that in fact, it was just last night, in San Anselmo, they are putting on the ballot in November a tax to renovate Memorial Park, and we at the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers have agreed to support that, and this is the result of a year-long dialogue between the Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers and San Anselmo, which started out with an idea of a plan that broke most of the guidelines that we had set out, and we worked with them and we found some compromises, and they moved away from having a special election. They moved towards a different kind of per unit tax. They found a way to give a discount to elderly people. They made it so it wasn't an evergreen tax. We don't believe in taxes that go on forever. And it's flat, it doesn't escalate. So there were a number of changes that they made that made us happy, and we think that this is a good model, and we're hoping that others will follow suit. We, in fact, now are starting to get engaged in the next thing that's going to be happening in this county, which is a 2020 effort to get passage of a county-wide fire protection tax. And we think that this is important to have happen as opposed to having balkanized approach where every city does its own thing, and you get good protection in places with more money and not so good protection in places without money. So we're favoring the county-wide approach rather than the balkanized approach. But the devil's always going to be in the details, and we're trying to work with the county to make it as fair as possible. So there will be an effort to have a tax on the March ballot with a new joint power authority to oversee the countywide approach. It will do the whole gamut of things, or so they hope. And we are lobbying for it to be a progressive parcel tax, which is to say that we would kind of think it's unfair for a small studio condo to pay the same as the mall. So we're trying to work with them, at least in that direction. And then quickly on a couple other things on the 2020 ballot, gonna be back to renew their parcel tax. They're facing a fiscal cliff. We supported them on the last measure because they were basically almost bankrupt. And we felt that it was necessary to help them get 4-year funding so that they could get some new management and a new board and engage in some serious cost cuts, which they have done. And now we'll see what happens. Will they have the right plan going forward or not? Time will tell. And then there are 2 other issues coming in 2020 on the ballot, 2 other taxes. There will be renewal of SMART, 4% sales tax on the March ballot, and also Marin County open space in November, half-cent sales tax extension. And this one's going to be interesting to watch because, as you know, open space has been really neglected in terms of fuel load accumulation. They haven't done a great job with the existing amount of money, and will they tell us something different in terms of commitments the next time around? So, we held the fire here. Finally, statewide issues. There are 3 coming your way. There is ACA 1 in March, which will be a statewide constitutional initiative to lower the threshold for all infrastructure bonds, which is to say all bonds, to 55% voter approval from the current 2/3, and ditto for school parcel taxes under SCA 5, also possibly on the March ballot. And then finally, in November, there will be on the ballot in 2020, unless a compromise is somehow worked out before then, there will be a split roll tax initiative, which the education lobby has been pushing hard for. And they're trying to carve out of the Prop 13 protection all the non-residential commercial properties, which is to say everything but apartment buildings that's commercial. Who knows, maybe that comes next. So, how you can help us, if you can, we really need help. We're capacity constrained. We're trying to do a lot of things throughout the county. If you can get involved, let us know. We're looking for leader people, we're looking for volunteers with specific projects, and we're looking for all kinds of different skills. So if you have something that you can contribute, you know how to do this, you know how to do that, please talk with us. And then finally, again, we could use your financial support, and here's how you can do it. So thank you for listening, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Could you explain a little bit more about the, what you call it, a graduated or
Progressive. Right.
Parcel tax?
Right, okay, so the normal parcel taxes that have been used are what I call a flat parcel tax, which is to say, everybody pays the same amount of tax, whether you're a mansion or a shack. That, you know, that's got its fairness issues. There are different kinds of progressive parcel taxes. Some are per unit, which have typically been used like for parks or things like that. Or there are ones that would be per square foot of improved property up to a certain limit. So that's what a progressive parcel tax would be. Now, I don't know that everybody in the room here would agree with that approach, but that's what we're advocating.
Can I point out one of the
Yeah.
unfairnesses of that? You have a parcel tax that's flat, so you have a 1-bedroom house with a elderly couple, no kids, paying the same as the parcel across the street, which is a 25-unit apartment building with 25 kids. And this is a school tax. That makes no sense. The tax, by the way, should not be on the landlords, it should be on the unit. So if you have a kid, and you want to go to school.
You're saying on the occupant basis?
Yeah, you should be paying that tax, in my opinion.
Yeah, Mimi, thanks for your presentation. I'd like to point out to you people, to be advised that, when the water district finally held a big meeting to discuss, these taxes and fees, overwhelmingly, the people that spoke were against it, and they completely ignored it. They said, quote, "We realize it's a flawed approach, but we're gonna go ahead with it anyway." And the only reason I bring that up, some of these directors are gonna be up for election. Keep that in mind.
Can I add to that one quick thing, and Mimi knows this, the last time Costa opposed their tax measure, I would say half the room.
At MMWD?
Yeah, it was MMWD.
Yeah.
Half the room was in favor, and half the room was opposed, which we were perplexed at. And then casually at the very end, one of the directors said, "And we'd like to let you know how many of our employees are deeply interested in this. Could everybody who's an employee stand up?" And half the room stood up. And by the way, they don't live in Marin. So they, even at that meeting, half the room were employees,
Yeah.
making sure that they're gonna get what they wanna get.
But they have the $180,000 salary.
Yes, yeah,
Well,
that's
that's
the
the main thing, it's like, one of the things I did when I ran last year is I broke Mark's budget, and in 2015, there was a $4 million jump to employee costs that was directly related to the recent management fee that they put on to the entire watershed district. And this most recent increase, they're up to $9 million above 2014 rates, and they're saying they need it for capital infrastructure. Well, part of that is because they mismanaged the budget beforehand. Their debt service ratio was out of whack. They couldn't borrow the amount that they needed for the bond measure to actually pay for the capital upgrades over time, which they should have done when rates were historically low. No, what they did is they gave it away to the people that they felt like they needed to answer to, which is not the ratepayers.
Right.
So now they're trying to hide it with this, hybrid version of pay-go and half bond service, which is actually the worst of all worlds because it's the highest cost we could possibly pay.
That's right.
And none of this was talked about before the election. And I was trying to bring it up, but I wasn't getting traction. Now everybody knows this is what they're doing. They're not paying attention to the infrastructure, they're paying the unions.
The other thing they did in your election, and the one before that, and the one before that, is they don't have any rate increases during election years.
Right.
And that's on one of their own slides. When I read that slide, and it wasn't up on the screen, I had it.
Yeah.
When I read that at the podium at the court, it was Mill Valley, workshop, Cynthia Kohler called me a liar. Called me a liar.
Saw that.
I'm reading, and I said, "I'm reading your document, your document's wrong, fix it, but I'm reading your document."
Which is why they didn't video their meetings.
That's right.
We videotaped.
And she got her nose bent down her throat at a debate I had with her. I said, look, I don't know what you guys are doing, but, you asked us all to conserve and you were rewarded with higher water bills. So you basically asked us to pay more for less. And she, went off on this tangent that made really no sense. And I said, I don't care how you couch it. At the end of the day, the average Marin citizen is opening up their bill saying, I conserve water, I'm doing a good thing, and my bill has added 20%. What happened?
So I have a question for you guys. Of those of you who are rental property owners, how many of you own homes that are rented out as opposed to like large multi-unit buildings? Okay, so fair number. So one of the things, one of the things that you might want to be aware of is repaving fees. So if you have a home, well, any kind of property, but I think it's particularly onerous for people who are owning a home. If you own a home and for whatever reasons it has to have sprinklers installed, for example, if you do remodeling beyond a certain percentage of the square footage, or your insurer tells you whatever, you have to install sprinklers. Well, you have to go to the larger meter. When you go to the larger meter, many times they have to dig up the street. Well, first they charge you a couple $1,000s or more, depending on the size of the meter, 2,000, 7,000, whatever the number is for the meter. Then you pay for your sprinkler. Then MMWD makes you put down a $16,000 repaving fee. Deposit. But at the penultimate board meeting that I went to, one of the board members was talking about the fact that, well, they lose money on the $16,000, so maybe it should be raised higher. So,
Because they have these supervisors that oversee the contractors that they hire.
Right.
So we've got two supervisors, the contractor supervisor and then the NMWD supervisor that have to make sure it's being done correctly.
So, and my one piece of advice on this is supposedly you can get your own person, pave the road, but if it's not to their standards, then they're gonna do it again and charge you for it. Yes, Steve?
So, one of the problems is that in San Anselmo, in order to get the right to dig in the street, you have to pay for repaving, I think it's 40 feet of the whole street.
Wow.
So San Anselmo is making money off of,
Not on the council anymore.
off of the need for somebody to upgrade their, whether it's sewer or water or whatever else.
Yes.
Yeah, sometimes it's hard to inform the public on a difficult topic, but in this particular case, the water district has all the data, all the historical data, and it's all just math. They could very easily have told everybody on the website, the logical place on the website where you're gonna go to look at your bill, have a little part that says, because they have other ways they notify you about other things that are gonna be happening, alerts of this and that. They put a little calculator out there, a little Excel calculator, you had to dig for it, and it said this is how that's going to affect you. But they could have done all that math, pushed it right to every ratepayer up front for a long period of time, then supported that with other marketing materials and other Prop 218 things and whatnot.
Including a Prop 218 with a protest notice, form right in it.
Exactly, and then in that case, then I think they would have notified the public as best as they possibly could have, and then the issue goes to what is the smart thing to do? You borrow the money or you get the more financial parts. But so after the meeting was over, I sent my district representative. I said, I don't get it. Why didn't you tell me this on my bill?
Mm-hmm.
And why didn't you tell everybody on the bill? Because you presumed at the meeting that anybody not there didn't care.
Right.
And that is just, you cannot accept that premise any longer. You would videotape your meetings, we could go back and see where your lawyer said X, where your lawyer said Y, where your lawyer said Z on separate days.
Yes.
And the case could be built like you're building it now, but we have a lot of the evidence is not
Yeah.
there for us.
By the way, thanks for that comment, Bruce. The Coalition of Sensible Taxpayers will take a tiny little victory lap. We think, might be premature, but we think